Hello, I'm Father Michael Shields from Siberia, Russia, and I would like to tell a little bit about myself and how I got to Magadan, Russia. First of all, my own vocation story. I was probably 7 years old when I first thought about being a priest, and it was deep. It was a clear call, you might say, even for a 7-year-old, knowing that God was someone calling him to the priesthood. And then my whole life preparing for priesthood has kind of like been a tag. Jesus would come or God would come and talk to me, and I'd run the other way. So it was through my young adulthood. I was obviously very much active in the Catholic Church, and in college I kind of went away from the church. But even at that time I felt God was talking to me and said, be a priest, be a priest. And it's kind of like the hound of heaven that the Lord chases you, and pretty soon you just have to give up because He's so much stronger and His will is so much clearer. And so after college I received a fine arts degree, a designer degree, and at that time I wasn't really active in the church, and I came home and I felt a really deep experience. The call of God at that time was go and become a priest, and at that time I just couldn't deny it. So I went to my parents, who had known that I hadn't been to church very much, and I said, you have to sit down for a minute. And so they sat down and I said, I want to be a priest. And they stood up right away. Go, what? I says, yeah, I want to be a priest. And they were surprised, and of course they were delighted. And then I went to my seminary director of the parish of the Archdiocese of Anchorage. I'm from Anchorage, Alaska, is the diocese. I talked to him, and he said, don't you think you should go to church regularly? I said, yes, I will go to church regularly. So don't you think you should go to confession? Yes, I'll go to confession. He says, okay. So I went to confession on Friday, went to church on Saturday, and went back to his office on Sunday. He says, well, I'm ready now. So he said, well, I met more regularly. I said, okay. So we agreed, and then by September I went into the seminary, and it was the beginning really of a call that had been deep in my heart, and it just developed, like a seed. It was growing. There was things that needed to grow, and some things needed to be pruned. And so for 6 years I was in the seminary. Now, I was the first native Alaskan. I was born in Alaska, and I was the first priest to be ordained for Alaska, for the diocese. The Alaska diocese where I am is a missionary diocese. For 100 years they preached the gospel, and they never had a vocation. So I was the first vocation. So it was pretty special, I think, for me at least. I felt that special. But there's so many questions that come when you're discerning priesthood. And so I went to the seminary, and it was 6 years, and I received my master's in theology. And at that time I felt like, what kind of priesthood are you calling me to? So I took a leave before I was ordained as a deacon, and I joined a l'Arche community. A l'Arche community is a community that works with handicapped children, and you enter in a family of faith. And it was so beautiful because it was there that the priesthood again came to me, but it was a different type of priesthood, a priesthood of servanthood. And that really touched my heart very deeply. I met at that time the spirituality of Brother Charles de Foucault, Blessed Charles, who served in Africa, served the Muslims in Africa, and he said, I want to be a universal brother, a servant priesthood. And so that started forming me deeply as a priest, and so I became ordained for the Archdiocese of Alaska. I came back and I did some more study, and it made so much sense. Priesthood was like comfortable. It was exactly who I should be. And I grew very quickly, and I had Alaska is such a beautiful place. I'm an outdoors person. I climbed mountains, I skied, I would take young people on hikes, and my priesthood again grew. Then I have to tell you, it was about 7 years after I was ordained, there was a light. Every priest has a light in their heart. It's called the vocation light. And sometimes it glows, and sometimes it goes less. And mine was going less. The light was giving less, and I really started being concerned. I said, what does that mean? And so I really prayed. I said, Lord, it's really, I am convinced this is who I should be, but what is happening? Why is this feel of the vocation getting less strong? And it was at that time that my bishop invited priests of our diocese to go to Magadan, Russia. Magadan, Russia is a former prison camp city of Stalin in far east Siberia, not far from Alaska, 4.5 hours by plane. And at that moment, we were called to actually celebrate a Mass for the first time in a city that was closed. It was a prison camp city. 1 million to 2 million people were there. We don't know how many died. And it was the first open Mass in a city that was used to persecute people who are of faith. And it was so touching to me and so completely life-changing. And the light started up again. You know, you said that light started to become strong again. And I said, this is maybe something I want to do with my life. And so then I came back a year later, and I was so amazed. The beauty of the city had disappeared. Now I could just see ugliness. I could see the gray, the Soviet city. I was treated poorly. There were soldiers with guns. It was like a military capital almost. And so I said, that's it. This can't be it. I can't be here. I don't want to be here. And so I didn't know what to do. There was this desire, and yet it was repulsive almost. And so then I went on a retreat. And it was the retreat that I asked the Lord, show me what next. And Brother Charles de Foucault says, priests need a vocation within a vocation. They need to discover that light of vocation and inflame it one more time. And that's what happened. I heard actually in this retreat, go pray in the camps. And my life in Magadan, from that moment I knew where I was going to live and I knew where I was going to die. And I took the vocation of Brother Charles de Foucault. I took on his habit, I took private vows. And in 1994, with the blessing of my bishop, with the blessing of my priest, with the blessing of my friends, with the blessing of my family, I got on a plane and I flew from Anchorage, Alaska to Magadan, Russia. And I got off the plane and I got on my knees and I kissed the ground that I knew where I was going to die. And my vocation started there in Magadan prison camps of Russia.